Good evening, call to order.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Cheryl Fuller.
Here.
Dan Nicholas.
Here.
Trey Pavicic.
Here.
Rick Pavanato.
Here.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, this is a very pleasant evening because we're going to start with a student perspective.
We haven't had one for a while.
No, thank you guys for coming.
All right, so we have some representatives of North High here. So if you guys could just introduce yourself and then share with the board your story that you're here to share.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, my name is Emmett Thulin. I'm a senior at North. And some things, we were just going to talk about a few like shortfalls and some good things that are going on. And one of the main things is that I think the teachers have been super accommodating through all of this, whether that just be in class, like a video or something doesn't work and just electronically it's not making sense. They'll change their lesson plan around that and make do with it. And then a lot of my teachers, because an 80-minute period is something that we're not really all that used to, they're accommodating for us and making like little short, like 3-minute, go up, use the bathroom, go get a glass of water, like a little something to eat, like that. And so I think that's just been really a positive thing that they're doing. And then also I'm involved in the speech team at North. And we just had our first all-team meeting today. And we got our head coach on the, I think like the DGN Zoom account. And so we've been able to use those meetings efficiently and well. And I think that's something that activities like speech that can be fully online, I think that's really positive that we're getting those going and moving. And then just a few things that I think like might need a little work is that some teachers have been assigning work outside of class that's like additional lectures. And I feel like some teachers aren't using their complete 80 minutes to the maximum capacity that it can be used for. And so that's all that I have unless you have any questions for me.
All right, let's keep going around and we'll then just, then maybe some questions will come out.
Hello? Okay,
Yep,
great.
sound good.
Emmett took some of my points, so I'm just going to reiterate some of the stuff he said as well. Hello, my name is George Fotos. I'm a junior at Downers Grove North, and I have been asked to give my opinions on the benefits and consequences of remote learning. There are some things that I have liked and appreciated about remote learning, and I love the way that the district set up our schedules. I feel like it gave us enough time to focus on that class at hand, and then give us enough time to reset for our next class. Also, I get more sleep, and I think that's great. I don't know about you guys, but the way my schedule is set up, some of my classes, I don't have like a second period or a first period, and I get to sleep in and get more rest, which is great. And like Emmett said, I really appreciate what my teachers have done. They've been super understanding, like they understand everything with everything going on, and they've been there for me, whether it be after class or via email. Some things that I think found were challenging during remote is that we're not face-to-face, obviously, with my classmates and my teachers. It doesn't really allow me to build that student-teacher relationship and even a student-student relationship. There are some students in most of my classes that I don't even know, and I just would like to get to know them in some way. Another challenge for me is that it's difficult to stare at a screen for a long period of time. I lose interest very quickly because of the no interaction with my teachers and my fellow students. As I said, I'm a junior, and junior year is usually a huge academic year because this is the year that colleges look at for grades. Additionally, I feel like I'm kind of missing out on some class experiences, such as labs and science classes, or just different leadership opportunities in other classes, which I feel like I could benefit from. hold on, I'm not done. Sorry. Currently at North, I am a part of the Positively North Stars program, which helps incoming freshmen transition from middle school to high school. I have a younger brother, Nico, who is a freshman, and he has benefited greatly from this program. I feel the way that Mrs. Lichman and Mr. Leslie have done this was amazing. He now knows that he's got more upperclassmen outlets to ask for help just besides me. I'm also involved in the PE trainee course at North. Being remote has made that class very difficult because it is student-led. And the whole kind of purpose of that class is to provide in-person instruction, giving students the experience to be able to lead their peers. For the remainder of this semester, I feel that even the next semester as well, I kind of just want to go back to school. I want to be in person, whatever it would look like, either hybrid or full-time. But I want to go back once it's safe to return and stay. And I feel like stay is a big point with that. I don't really want to go back on like a trial basis and then get sent back home to remote, because I feel like that would just kind of be just as upsetting as getting school taken away in the first place. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Hello. Okay, hi, my name is Veronica Latocha, and I am a freshman at North High School. I would first like to thank all the teachers, staff, and Board of Education members for all the hard work you have put in to make this year the best that it can be. I am truly grateful for all you have done for North High students, especially freshmen, to help us transition into this new learning experience. Today I wanted to talk about some of the things that are going well during remote learning and some of the things that are not. So I'm going to start with the things I do like. Overall, I think that it is less stressful to do school online than in person. We only have half of our classes each day, and that helps us with the amount of work that we have. It's also nice that I get to do work from home. I get to be in a place where I know I can do quality work and also stay focused. I have the chance to be comfortable while doing schoolwork, which makes it a little less stressful. There are also some things that I do find challenging. The first is that students have a lot more responsibility on themselves. We have to make sure that all of our assignments are turned in on time and in the right spot, and if there's something wrong, you have to contact your teacher in your own time. I think that the biggest disadvantage when doing remote learning is not being able to be with people and socialize. I think it is very important to be with your friends and other people so you can make new friends and make those in-person connections. I also think that doing online learning is not the best for students' mental health. Not only are we experiencing a pandemic, but now we have to stare at our screens listening to our teacher talk all day, and this is in addition to already being on our phones for most of the time. One thing that I think has been the hardest for the freshman class is definitely making new friends. We are all new to the school and we don't know a lot of people, and we cannot make those connections over a Zoom call. So in most classes, we are sitting with strangers and are expected to make conversations, even though we've never met or talked to these people in our life. Most of the time, nobody talks when we're in our breakout rooms because, again, we don't know each other and it's a little awkward to talk to someone over a computer screen. I'm hoping that we can go back to school using the hybrid plan. This will give us a chance to make those in-person connections with students and teachers, and also get better understanding in our classes. As much as I love waking up and just opening my computer to get to class, I think it would be most beneficial to go back to school, even if it's just for a couple of days a week. Thank you.
Any questions? I'll start. I have one. So you all talked about, excuse me, it's terrible to cough. You all talked about, and we've heard this a lot in the letters we've received, about difficulties being engaged and staying engaged. And I get it. Like you said, you know, like having some frequent little breaks to grab a snack or grab some water or whatever has helped. Are there any other things you think that would be helpful to get students engaged, especially freshman students, while, you know, honoring social distancing, et cetera, wearing masks, et cetera?
I think that overall, like, I can stay engaged for a good amount of time, but I think that those 5-minute, 10-minute breaks that our teachers give us are always helpful, just because we can go away from our screens and just not, like, walk around or something, just so that we can get kind of moving and just not sitting for a long period of time. But overall, I think that's really it.
And with that, I think that some of my teachers have been, if they like make it more towards the middle of class, whereas some teachers will put it like within the last 10 minutes, which is kind of just like not very good as serving for a break. And so if it's more structured towards where the students have the break in the middle, I think that would prioritize just them being able to then focus for the first half and then come back and be re-energized for the second.
Yeah, I agree with what Emma said. They both pretty much summed up my answer as well.
And if you guys have any problems with connectivity and staying on Zoom or just even getting on the sites, et cetera?
Yes.
Yes, you get, okay. Would you say like infrequently, frequently?
It's mostly difficult, especially in PE classes.
Uh-huh.
When I grow up, I want to be a PE teacher. And the way that my PE class currently is structured is great, but it's very difficult because our class is like student-led. And if a student can't lead the class because of their connectivity issues, the class doesn't really, there's really no class.
Right.
But it's every once in a while.
So, any other questions?
And then, oh, sorry.
No,
and
no,
then
no, you go
just with the connectivity part of it, I've been in and out or just like technology doesn't work. Like I got a loaner Chromebook because like my Chromebook wasn't charging, and then this Chromebook doesn't have like audio hooked up through it, so then I have to call in from my phone.
Uh-huh.
And so I feel like it's just a lot of like the little issues or like your Wi-Fi's out or things like that. But then I think teachers are also being good with it, and they're like students are reaching out, and there's a good line of communication open between everybody with it.
Are you able to talk to your, oh, I'm sorry, you're going to say something?
It's okay. I haven't really been having a lot of problems. If sometimes like you can't really hear the teacher just because it starts glitching, and then it's kind of hard to communicate just because you could have missed like an important part of what we're doing.
Are you able to talk to your teachers when you need to? Like outside of class, are you able to reach people and say, hey, I missed this, or I need help with that?
Yeah, I usually just email my teachers, let them know what happened, and it usually gets clarified.
Thank you.
We've been using Remind, which is a great app. It's more of like a texting, for lack of better words,
Okay.
instead of, because some people are still only using emails. So that's another way that we've been communicating with our teachers.
Sherelle, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question about the PE class. You said it's student-led. Is the student here doing it, or are they trying to lead it from home? Is that what you said to me? Yeah?
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
The PE question? You said it was...
Can you explain how PE Leaders is working?
Yeah, so I'm in a trainee course. So we're leading via Zoom. So we're like at our homes, and we make a workout, and we have to perform the workout for the class, and the class it's kind of like a repeating type thing.
So it's led from the student's home and not at the
Correct,
school
yes.
as well? Okay, that probably is difficult.
Because the course is that the student is actually the leader of the PE class.
Mm-hmm.
So they help design and lead that classroom experience for the rest of the students. So, they're remote, just like all of us.
Yeah, so they couldn't come in and use the school facilities because they'd be by themselves to lead that class?
Yeah, well, and we have no students coming in until soon into the school during the day.
Okay, yeah, I know, but I was just wondering because that would be just one or two people, so the social distances rule would definitely apply because there is not a ton of students. Just asking, I was just thinking about how that's being administered from a home space, so.
Yeah, it's still all of the challenges of transporting students and getting them here and all of those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Mike.
So I heard at least one of you say something to the fact that you're getting more, you feel like you're getting more work assigned to you. And that was actually something I'm looking forward to hearing more feedback about. I was recently having a conversation with a high school friend of mine who's been a teacher. He's a AP Gov and history teacher in Michigan. And we were talking about this, and something he was concerned about was, as they're doing remote, is that temptation on the part of the teachers to take advantage of possibly the opportunity to have the students do more outside of the actual class time, and in difficulty in engaging exactly how much they should be or shouldn't be doing. And I kind of saw this first probably month or two of sort of almost a conversation potentially back and forth between students and their teachers, trying to find that balance, because this is new to everybody. But it is something I think we need to maybe stay on top of, to make sure that the balance is right, that we're not seeing too much busy work outside of the classroom. And I hate to categorize it as busy work, but lack of another term coming to mind. But the idea is just that that you're not getting overly stressed. But it sounds like I heard comments about things being a little less stressful with all of this. I'm hearing you're more rested than you might have been otherwise, and that's always been a concern of ours too. Kids coming in 0 hour and staying after school and going home and getting all that homework done, and then getting a few hours of sleep and getting up and doing it again. So that seems to be a positive there. And Joanne and I were having a little conversation on the way in about trying to focus on the things that we can do and the things that are positive versus what we're missing out on and the negatives. And so there's certainly some things about this that are, if not different, maybe even a little better than the way we were doing things. And hopefully we can expand upon that and learn from it.
Well, I was going to just say, the thing that I don't have a question, but I did observe that you were also positive and so adaptable and taking on the challenge. I believe one of you said you had to take more responsibility for some of the things, and I think you'll grow more because of that in the end. But I'm very impressed. I'm hoping all the other students too are that you represent the way many of them are, because I think you're handling the challenge of this very, very well.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you for coming out and presenting.
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Now you're welcome to stick around and sit through a board meeting, or you're welcome to head on home, either one.
Run away. I wouldn't do it.
As fast as you can.
I wouldn't do it.
Now, guys, we're going to hear all about interesting stuff today.
Actually, a lot of the
Little Monty
questions are going to be
Python.
answered. They're going to want to go home and tune in.
Let's not get carried away, Hank. Okay, so we're going to go with the board workshop. The first item is the school plan update.
Indeed.
All right. What I hit?
Ooh, I'm glad I can see that because.
Do you want to trade places with me? 'Cause
No,
I
I'll
can
be
sort of
fine.
see
I
it.
can see it from here. I just need to get once I get rolling,
Here,
I'll be
move over
fine.
for you.
Let me see if I can get it turned back up.
There we go. Yeah, sorry about that. I dropped my remote and threw everything off.
Oh, yeah? This looks fairly good.
All right. So it's been 3 or 4 weeks since we've been together for a board meeting to discuss where we're at in returning to school. Just going through here, a lot of material to share with you tonight. Tonight's really going to be focused on guidelines, metrics, and the things that we need to respond to in trying to get students back in person. And then next Monday will be, hopefully, we're working very diligently on coming up with concrete plans. We'd like to have some of those to you for next week, and then I'll walk through the timeline from there. All right, as you're well aware, this summer was busy with lots of guidelines, feedback, and planning. We've seen this before, but this is every key date that led up to the August 17th first day of school. But what I really want to point out this is the timeline of changes since school started. Okay, so we were supposed to be back on the 17th. On that day, 4 key pieces of guidance were released. Quick reminder that just in the few days before that, we received 2 major pieces of guidance that really caused us to not return on the 17th for in-person and move to a remote model. It wasn't until the week after that that we began the fully remote schedule that our students were speaking about today. So it's really been only a few weeks that we've been operating under the new fully remote schedule. Since then, you can see many things, including guidance that gets released and then updated on the same set of guidance. So that's particularly frustrating for us, because we'll get a piece of guidance and we'll start responding to it and planning for it. And just when we think we understand it and we have answers ready to go, then the rules of the game change again, and we're back, maybe not at square one, but we're back having to adapt and change those things. So a lot of people are referring to this as the hamster wheel, and that's kind of what it feels like as we've been working through this. Some of the major things that we'll talk about that are on this list: the continuum of risk is greatly influencing our return to school. That's from the CDC, as well as the limiting of mixing of groups and cohorting. The dashboards that have been released both at the state level and at the county level. And then the exclusionary charts, which indicate when it is that somebody should stay home or should be isolated or quarantined. Those started out very restrictive the week before school started and have been relaxed a little bit in the last couple of weeks, especially related to reoccurring symptoms. If you remember the last time we met, we talked about how restrictive things like seasonal allergies would be, and some of those limitations have been relaxed in the last week. So that might make it easier for us to, once we get people back to school, keep them here. And we were informed today that the CDC is issuing new guidance for schools tomorrow. So it will continue to come.
Yeah.
All right, this slide continues to adapt and change, but yes, we are still continuing vigorously to try to return students to in-person learning. I mean, you heard it from our students tonight. They want to be back here, but we have to do it in a way where we're sure that it's safe and that it fits inside of the guidelines that we have been told will keep students and staff and our wider community safe. These are all the reasons that you've seen, and they remain. What we hear is that remote learning is going well for most. The stories that you heard from our students tonight are similar to the emails that are coming in. There's a few bumps and glitches here, and obviously we're very reliant on technology and it working. We've had a few nationwide outages of Zoom and of Google and Amazon Web Services, which a lot of the tools are built on. Those are things that are out of our control. We also have students that have some challenges with internet in their homes that we have been actively working on. You heard tonight of a challenge with a Chromebook. I mean, we're responding to those things. We're trying to close those gaps. We are working very closely with a variety of internet providers. We're working with DuPage County and the DuPage County Regional Office of Education on getting internet service into students' homes. We're working with the Education Foundation to purchase internet equipment for families that can't afford it. So we are, Gina has been amazing working with the rest of the team in the organization to try to make sure that students have long-term fixes for internet and technology issues. Because we fully anticipate that at some point in the year we'll be needing to return to a longer period of remote once flu season comes in, which we've talked about since the beginning. So the team is focused on long-term fixes for our students, not necessarily short-term fixes. You heard some of the voices of our students tonight. We're continuing to listen. I receive probably half a dozen emails a day, at least, probably more than that on average. We're monitoring social media and all of the normal networks that we follow. Our principals are meeting with students and staff and parents as well, and constantly gathering information as to how it's going. Our feedback committee that the board asked us to form this summer is up and running, and they're working on creating student, family, and staff surveys, and we expect those to go out very soon. We're working with a third-party company that specializes in gathering this kind of feedback for schools. So it will be faster for us to analyze and process that information and respond to it. Just getting it up and going for the first round is always the hardest part. And it always takes us a little bit longer for student surveys because we have to allow families to opt out of those kinds of surveys. So it takes a little bit longer to get wide-scale mass student surveys up and running. We have lots of opinions, suggestions, ideas coming in, and we read and respond to all of those. We can't always give people the answers they want, but we always try to explain why we're doing what we're doing and why we're responding the way we are. There are a lot of strong feelings in all different directions on this, and you can see some of those up there, from wanting to be fully remote for the rest of the year to wanting to reopen tomorrow. And you can see more synchronous, less synchronous. You heard some of the examples here today. Some feel like we should never reopen until there's a cure. Some think that we should reopen right away and that this is not as big of a deal as it's made out to be. I mean, we're hearing stuff on all sides of it, and we're listening to it and considering it and responding to it. One of the opinions that has been growing in its voice is that we should just ignore state guidance and state officials. So one of the things that I've done in response to that consideration is reach out to the district legal counsel. And just a reminder, that legal counsel represents the district and the board. They don't represent the administration. And what they have provided is a memo that I've provided to the board, but the closing summary of that memo is that the district is required to follow the governor's executive orders and should also abide by the joint guidance from ISB and IDPH to have the greatest chance of avoiding liability for legal actions related to its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, inside of that is obviously that our number one priority isn't avoiding liability. It's about keeping students safe. And as I've said many times before, I have to trust that the health professionals in our state and in our county are interested in doing just that, keeping our students, our staff, and our greater community safe. And we have to believe that that's what these guidelines are issued to do. And I know that return to school and COVID and safety guidelines and all of this is wrapped up in the larger political discourse. However, I have to look at this and assume that the measures we are taking are going to keep people healthy and safe. And it is my first responsibility to do that. My second responsibility as the superintendent is to protect the resources of this community and of the taxpayers within this community, and to blatantly disregard guidelines and guidance and mandates from the state level, that be the governor, IDPH, ISB, the DuPage County Health Department. Any of those organizations would greatly put the district at risk of lawsuits. And whether or not those would win or lose, those kinds of things take away district resources very quickly, both in the form of administrative time and the time of the Board of Education and of our legal counsel and all of those leading the district, but also in the resource of money. Those can get very expensive very quickly. So my responsibility is to protect the students and of course the staff, but also to protect district resources. And I can only do that if we follow these guidelines. And I know some people don't agree with them, but that's not my option. My responsibility as the superintendent of schools here is to carefully understand that guidance and then implement it with fidelity. So I just want to iterate that we understand a lot of these things, that we're hearing a lot of frustration of the uncertainty. People just want to know when and how it's going to look. And you heard from our students, and if we come back, we want to know that we're there, and we don't want to flip-flop back and forth. We know that switching between these plans involves a lot of capacity and energy. I was talking with Nancy about this, and in a lot of ways, this is just redesigning school. It's like picking up a city and relocating the whole city somewhere else. And there's a lot of complexity in this. And every time you answer one question, there's a million more questions that come out of it. And, you know, we know that the planning also impacts so many individuals, right? And it's different for each student, it's different for each family. And how we work through that is very complex. And we understand that people just want to know what's going to happen so they can plan for it and they know what's coming next. And as we have all summer, as soon as we know definitively what we're going to do, we share it as widely as we can. But we also know that each one of these scenarios is going to get intense feedback and scrutiny. And that's fair. I mean, it's fair for the community to ask a lot of questions and seek to understand why we're doing things the way we're doing. But know you know, that we're hard at work at doing this, and we're also trying to run school at the same time. If we would have been provided the guidance that we've received since the beginning of the school year, back when we started this process at the beginning of July, our plans would look much different today than they did when we presented them in August.
Yep.
You know, we would have built things much differently, and we'd probably be back to school right now. But the fact is, continued shifting in guidance and metrics and understanding of how this is all going to work makes it really difficult to plan for. And we are on that hamster wheel of trying to get back, but it just keeps churning, and we're running school right now. You know, this would have been one thing in the summer when we had time to plan and staff and students weren't here. But the administrative jobs that we hold are full-time jobs any other year. And we're doing those same jobs right now, and teachers are doing those same jobs right now, and more, because they're having to plan for completely different things than they've ever had to do before, while we're trying to rebuild school and rethink school. This is a monumental task to try to do all of this right now. And we have to understand that just flipping the switch and saying we have a model and it works doesn't factor in all of the other things that go along with it, some that we'll talk about later.
Can I just add?
Yep.
You alluded to it in the timeline. But the science is changing all the time.
Correct.
And the guidance is changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a whole nother layer, and it's not anybody's fault, it's just that this is an evolving situation, and that's a whole nother layer of complexity on top of all these other layer of complexities. You can have the best plan and it changes tomorrow because the guidance changes.
And later on, we'll try to show how we're trying to build so that even if numbers and metrics and guidance changes, that we'll have a program that will likely work up to a certain threshold of transmission of COVID in our community. We know there's no perfect solutions. We know that no matter what we do, somebody is going to be left out, somebody is going to be unhappy. We're doing our best to plan for the most that we can. And we also hope that everybody understands that every individual is different. How they respond to this is uniquely their experience. And it doesn't make what's going on right now right or wrong, their feelings right or wrong. Just what's right for somebody right now is very different than what's right for somebody else. And we're trying to consider those individual needs and considerations into all the planning we're doing, but it is challenging. All right, so what I want to spend a good chunk of time on tonight is making sure that the board and the community understands the changes that have occurred in health guidance since this summer. So over the last month, there's been a great deal that has come forward, and this is what's really shaping our return to school planning to make sure that it fits within the health guidelines. I've provided a summary document that I've shared with the board, and we'll make sure that this is up on our website. This is our internal, and I'm going to put this in a format here where you can read it, right? But I just want to give you the big overall picture of what we've done here administratively. Is we've spent many hours with health officials to try to understand how the overlapping guidance of the Illinois Department of Public Health, the DuPage County Health Department, and the CDC work together to help influence our decision making so that we know that whatever plans we're putting forward are safe for our student, staff, and greater community. So what we've done is created this crosswalk to show how the different pieces factor together. The first piece of guidance that came out that our board was asking for over 2 months before it came from Illinois Department of Public Health, and I advocated with our state senator and ISB to try to get this out sooner than we got it, are these different transmission levels that use metrics to determine what level of transmission, community transmission we are in with COVID. What it looks at is what's called a constellation method, looks at a variety of factors and brings them together to indicate, are we in minimal transmission, moderate, or substantial? Pardon me. For the layman, this is important because the greater the rate of transmission in the community, the less likely your safety measures are to be effective. So we need to integrate pieces that are less risky, and this is what the health professionals have helped me understand. It's all about risk management, all right? And as transmission is greater in your community, you can take less risk. As transmission is more minimal in your community, you can take more risks. So we're trying to devise programming that doesn't require a lot of changes based on where we're at in those transmission levels. So where are we at right now? Hold on, I think I skipped a slide. There we go. Maybe not. All right. But yeah, let's go back. Go to where we are right now. There we go. Okay, so these metrics are released every Monday. So these came out at 10 a.m. today. This is DuPage County Health Department's metrics. There's really 6 different metrics here. All that it takes is for one of them to be in the next restrictive level, and that's where we're at. So one metric in moderate puts us in moderate. One metric in substantial puts us in substantial. Where this gets complex is that the first metric in itself is a constellation metric. Okay, so the first metric is where do we sit as a county, either in the blue or orange. Orange is the warning level, as defined by the Illinois Department of Public Health. So what risk metric color are we in? Are we in blue or are we in orange? And in the past week, we moved from blue to orange. That alone, that one factor in moderate, would be enough for us to be in moderate. Okay? But we're also in moderate for the next one, which is cases per 100,000, which is currently sitting at 89. That is a moderate factor. Then the next one looks at weekly case trend. Are we trending up or down in all of our cases? This past week, we went from trending down by 21% to trending up by 15%. Okay. Youth trend looks at cases under the age of 20, and how are we trending on that? We went from trending down by 34% last week to trending up by 43% this week. Those last two metrics need to be trending for 2 consecutive weeks for them to kick in. That's why you don't see rating for those, because we haven't hit criteria for 2 consecutive weeks, but it's trending in the wrong direction for both of those. Weekly test positivity, the threshold for moderate is 5%. We were above that last week. We are below that this week. So that one is trending in the correct direction. And then the last one is neighboring counties in orange. Once in the last 4 weeks, we only have had 1 neighboring county at a time. Once you move to 2 neighboring counties in the orange, now that moves to moderate. So we've been alternating between Kane and Will, going back and forth, but we haven't had both at the same time. So that has left us in the minimal, not the moderate. That one is the most lengthy metric, because once you're there, it takes 4 straight weeks of not having those 2 there for you to move back to minimal. Okay? It is very easy to move to the more restrictive level. That could happen immediately on a weekly basis. If we ended up next Monday at 101 per 100,000 cases, the second metric, we would be in substantial. You're immediately in that level, and you need to be for 2 consecutive weeks out of that level to move out. So if we move to substantial next week, it's then 2 more weeks of good numbers where they're all in moderate to get into moderate, or that they're all in minimal to get to minimal. So it's much harder to move backwards than it is to move to more restrictive.
So it's 2 weeks at or below the established threshold?
Correct.
Okay.
2 weeks at or below the established threshold to move into a less restrictive transmission level. So this demonstrates how important our wider community is to making sure that we get back to school, and once we're at school, that we stay there. And I'll show you the impact on school in a second, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands kind of how these levels work and how we move in and out of them.
So to be clear, DuPage has defined a 2-week period as establishing a trend. But when you're talking about something trending up or trending down, even if something's trending down, if it's not at or below the threshold level. So if we're at 89, I thought we were at 93, but if we're at 89 now, and next week we're at 88, and the week after that we're at 87, well, let's say even more so, but we're trending down, but we're still not at or below threshold, so we're still considered moderate.
Correct. Yeah, and that wouldn't be, on this metric, be considered trending down. You'd be trending down if you move to the next metric below it. So you'd have to drop below 50 or below.
Okay, good.
Yep. All right. So once again, this is nothing that we as a district are setting. Right? These are metrics that are being set by the health professionals. This is data that's being gathered by IDPH, and we are just monitoring it and using it to influence the decisions that we make going forward. So how this impacts our instruction, these are recommendations from the DuPage County Health Department. And really, as you look through these, the hybrid schedules, we designed it over the summer, would only work within the minimal level of transmission. The key challenge for this is once we're into moderate, what the health professionals really start getting concerned about is the number of people you come in contact with on a daily basis. So we as an administrative team have been looking at it as kind of your individual cohort. How many unique people are you coming in contact with throughout your school day? And at minimal, we're not so worried about that because the PPE, the social distancing, the hand washing, all of the other measures that we have put in place keep you safe, because it's unlikely, even though you're coming in contact with more people, less of them are likely to have COVID. But as we move into moderate, it's more likely that you're going to come in contact with somebody that has been exposed to COVID. So we need to reduce the number of times that your PPE has to put up a fight against somebody breaking through those defenses. So we need to start limiting the number of people that you come in contact with at school on a daily basis. And when we move into substantial, we need to almost completely eliminate that risk. So you can see some of the basic things that we're thinking about. To bring all students back on a regular basis in the moderate transmission level, which is where we are now, and we'll at least be here for 3 more weeks, is the need to develop a new schedule that meets some of these safety guidelines, which I'll show you how we do that in a second.
Can I just?
Yep.
And we talked a little bit about this before. So just to be clear, so when we're when we're going to change levels between minimal, moderate, and substantial, if we become more restrictive, that's an immediate.
Correct.
Your numbers spiked, we're going to be more restrictive. If we're going to become less restrictive, it's going to take a period of time defined as two weeks, but in essence, it's really 3 weeks because we have some time to operationalize. So if I was a teacher, if I was teaching a math class, and I found out this week, oh, our numbers are starting to look pretty good, I would then know that potentially in no fewer than 3 weeks, we could be moving to a different type of schedule. But I would have at least 3 weeks to think about how I was going to do this and plan, et cetera.
Right, and this is important for students. It's important for families that are managing their family schedules and who's watching out for kids and who's making dinner and all of those kinds of things, right? So, however, the other direction could be immediate, right? It can become more restrictive immediate. So I know that can be challenging for families as well, right? So this is why it'll be important to communicate on a regular basis what direction is the data trending in. Right? And right now it is not trending in the right direction. And I am very concerned about how the Labor Day data that will influence the data this week will impact us for our next round of updates a week from now.
So Hank, at what point, I don't see it up here, does the data point to back to school full-time as normal?
Coming next. Coming soon. I'll get there. So what we need to try to do, obviously substantial transmission, they're saying it's pretty much a remote schedule. What they're looking for us to do is to bring in just very small groups of students at that point. And really almost all students are remote. What we need to try to do is to build a plan that works in moderate and minimal, because that is most likely where we are going to spend the majority of our time for the remainder of the school year. Our challenge is the plan that we built this summer doesn't work there in moderate. It only works in minimal. And as I've said many times already, even tonight, had we had this data in June or July, we would have a plan right now for students to be back in person that worked in moderate and minimal. However, we didn't have the luxury of having that information. So the last thing I want to bring to your attention is the CDC recommendations. And what the CDC recommendations, these came out on August 24th, do a nice job of talking about is this continuum of risk and matching up, the lowest risk, which is what you want to have when spread is substantial, to the highest risk, which is a risk you can take when community spread is minimal, and especially lower minimal. Right? Each one of these transmission levels, you could think, are you trending more on the less restrictive side or more towards the more restrictive side? So that's how all of these things then piece together to give us what to do. Now, our key dividing line is between some risk and medium risk, because we expect that we're going to live in moderate most of the year. And that's where low moderate sits in medium risk, high moderate sits in some risk. And the difference between the some and the medium risk is the mixing of groups, right? So when you're in some risk, they want you to try to start cutting out the amount of times in which students are mixing throughout the day, right? They want to keep your individual cohort, the number of students you come in contact with, small. And as we move the other direction, as we move to the left, the first thing we get to in the medium risk is the ability to start some mixing of groups. So at the high school level, the way the curriculum works, we're not like an elementary school. Elementary schools can do some risk pretty easily, right? It's the same teacher with the same group of kids for the whole school day. You know, you might push in some specials, you might have a lunch period, but you could keep those kids together in their own unique group for the whole day. That's not how high school's built. So we need to bring students back, and we need some mixing to be able to run a school day. We've looked at some like 1 period per day models, and it's just not worth the lift to bring students in for just 1 period. The disruption on all the other periods is so great that it's not worth the trade-off. Okay, so we need to have at least a schedule that allows some mixing of students throughout the school day. All right, so what the DuPage County Health Department has released is a return to school framework to provide us some local guidance about how all of these metrics work, and they've worked very closely with the Regional Office of Education and all of the local superintendents to try to help us understand how this tool works. And what it does is it gives us a pathway to in-person instruction that will be safe for students. And when we factor all of these things together, what you come up with is this handy-dandy diagram that I have tried to put together to piece together everything that we know across all of the stuff I just shared with you. Really, as I said, the dividing line in phase 4, that's where we're at for the state levels. State phase is phase 4. We have kind of these 6 degrees inside of phase 4 that range from low minimal, so you would be in those transmission levels, everything would be minimal and the numbers inside of those things would be pretty low. The next one would be, you'd still be in minimal, but the numbers would be trending towards moderate, right? Then low moderate, we're just into moderate. To high moderate, the numbers are trending towards substantial. To low substantial, we just got into it. To high substantial, we're very clearly in the substantial level. To then falling out of phase 4 and going into phase 3. Phase 3 would be like what we were in the spring, right? We'd be stay at home. Moving all the way across the continuum, phase 5 would be everybody's back to school every day. 100% of students are in attendance, although it might still be with some kind of safety protocols in place. As we look at this, our dividing line on this really falls between low moderate and high moderate. As we are in the kind of the low to mid moderate, we can start bringing students back in an A-B schedule as long as we limit how many times they mix throughout the day. So that means limiting the number of passing periods, which means limiting the number of classes that occur on any school day. Our hybrid schedule we built this summer had 4 mixes throughout the day. The health department would like to see us limit those, and you can see here, like at low minimal, we could do the 4 mixes. But as we move to high minimal, they'd like for us to drop those number of mixes to maybe 3 or less. As we're in moderate, where we're at now, they'd like to see a single passing period if we could do that on a daily basis. What starts to happen as we build these schedules is the schedules that were hybrid start to look more like the fully remote schedules, right? Where you have big blocks of time where you have 1 class transition during the school day. Students would come in for half a day but only go to 2 class periods, not 4, right? So it starts to, this is why it's starting to get helpful, is because the guidance is starting to point us in the direction of instructional outcomes, of plan design. Then what we're also we're going to have to work on that. We're going to have to work on a plan where all of our students can come back on a regular basis as long as we're in moderate. But then we also want to work on programming that for our most at-risk students, that even if we're in substantial, that we're still able to provide students at risk resources they need on a daily basis right up until we move into phase 3, should that happen. So we're going to try to cover the whole continuum from phase 3 to phase 5 with programming. It looks very different depending on what the community spread is and where we're at. So the group, as we move more towards substantial, the number of students and the size of the groups and the amount of mixing reduces as the transmission levels become more substantial.
So what's the delineating factor between low, moderate, and high, moderate?
Or any of the other ones.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering, is how are you deciding where you're at exactly?
So that's a great question, and what it comes down to is our own school community and what those metrics look like for us. So that's kind of up to our administrative team in conversations with the local health department to determine where we're at right now and a plan that will work in it. What we're trying to do is develop a plan that will work nearly through deep into high moderate, right? That until it looks like we're close to flipping over to substantial, that it will continue to work. We want the least flip-flopping, like our students talked about earlier, as possible. So we wanted to develop a plan that it looks like nearly all the way through moderate and all the way through, definitely all the way through minimal, that we'll be able to have students here on a regular basis, all students that wish to return, returning. That's the goal of what we're trying to build right now. But what switches that? It's us talking to the health department about here's what the metrics look like, here's what it looks like in Downers Grove and Woodridge and our greater community, here's been our response to it, here's been the number of cases that we've seen show up within our own schools, because that'll measure how well is our own community following the safety measures and protocols. It's a very school-by-school, case-by-case basis as to where that dividing line is and when you move from one to the other.
Do you have data that looks at specifically our community versus the county as a whole? And
Yes, yeah, we can pull off of their dashboards our zip codes and see what our data looks like.
All right.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
So let me just, what high schools in our general community? Are there any other high schools that are currently?
In DuPage County, no other high school is open right now. We're all wrestling with the same stuff, and I'll talk about, I'm getting to where that work in a second.
That's fine.
All right, so this is a good one for you to just spend some time digesting, and if you have questions, I can definitely address them next week when we're hopefully talking about how future programming fits inside of this continuum. So here, I've just identified a few of the major challenges. These are the top, most difficult challenges. There's many more underneath this. But first of all is just, developing programs for our students most at risk. We want our most at-risk students to be able to come at anywhere in that continuum from phase 4 on up, right? So we're working on that, and we're trying to bring students that fit that criteria back as soon as possible. Revising a schedule for all in-person learners that fits within that moderate and minimal range. To do that work, we're eyeing an October return, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. We have some health guidance that has changed drastically, especially related to the fitting of N95 masks for nurses and custodians. So each one of those folks that might come in contact directly with COVID-related symptoms or have to clean up after that all need to meet with a medical professional and have their masks fitted. And getting the appropriate masks that fit the person, A, and can be fitted appropriately, B, has been a challenge. As you can imagine, the availability of medical grade N95 masks is, it's not like you just walk into Walgreens and pick one up. So that has been a challenge to get. All the other PPE we have had very little challenge getting, but our first round of N95 masks that were on the IDPH list originally were then removed from the IDPH list. So then we had to go acquire a separate round of masks, which we did, but they didn't fit half of our people. So then we had to order another round, and every time those come in, you have to schedule an appointment. Good Sam has been amazing to work with us on this. They've been great partners. But you imagine they're seeing a lot of people as well, not just us. So we have to get those folks scheduled, get them in, get it fitted, make sure that they know what they're doing to be healthy and safe with those. So that has been, has slowed us down in getting some of our at-risk groups back. Because we can't bring anybody back until we have nurses to take care of people that might be sick and custodians that could clean a space where somebody could have had COVID.
Have we thought about certifying anybody in fitting an N95?
Yeah, we've looked at it, but right now we've just been focused on just getting them fitted. Transportation is hugely complex, especially because we share transportation services with District 68 and 58. So any plan that we're talking about for returning all of our students for in-person learning also needs to fit inside of the District 58 and 68 plans that are being developed. And they're developing their plans under the same changing guidance that we're developing our plans. So now you have a three-way fit that have to work together as well. So this, it's just the complexity of the problem that makes this go slower, and it isn't just like we could start tomorrow. The changing exclusionary guidance and decisions and the availability of students and staff those changes have actually made this better, or more likely that we're going to return in the loosening of those restrictions in the last week here. However, whatever plan that we build that fits in moderate and minimal, we still need to make sure that it fits within the needs of all of our families. So before we just bring everybody back, we need to know who's coming back and how many families wish to return with school looking this way rather than what we talked about in the summer. So just as in the summer, we put out, here's our plan, here's how the hybrid schedule is going to work, here's what it's going to look like for your kid. Do you want to come back to school with school looking this way? We need to do the same, provide that same opportunity to our families in whatever we build here. So we need enough time to communicate whatever this new schedule is and what it looks like, to allow families to understand that, to tell us if they're coming back. Some families might look at this and say, yeah, I was concerned this summer, but I'm in now because I'm much more comfortable with this new plan than I was with the old plan. Mm-hmm. Other families might look at this and say, whoa, wait a second, in the summer, I didn't know about this minimal, moderate, substantial stuff.
Sure.
And now that we're in moderate and trending the wrong way, I don't want to send my kid to school, right? So we built a lot of classroom assignments, sections, all of those things based on the number of students that would be in each classroom, right? Because if we had a small class, but more students returning in that small class, and they were scheduled in a small classroom because it was a small class, but now we can't do social distancing in there because more kids are going to return, we had to move them to a larger class and another class into that smaller class. So we have to get all of that survey data back from our families so we can reschedule parts of the building and make sure social distancing can be maintained when students are back. We also need to survey, we sent out a survey to all of our families about transportation to know if students are coming and if they're riding the bus. And if we have bus routes that have more than 11 students on them, then we need to build seating charts for each of those buses. That takes time as well over the next couple of weeks to build the seating charts, communicate them to everybody, make sure that our bus monitors, that we have bus monitors for every bus that have been trained on how the seating charts work and everything else. So there's a lot of pieces that go into this over the next few weeks. This is why you're hearing October. I know it sounds like we should be able to develop a schedule in the next couple of days and then next week have everybody back to school. And as much as I would love to be able to say that we could do that, it is just not possible to do that. Even if this is all that we had to do, right? And weren't just also trying to run teaching and learning at the same time we're doing all of this. And we'll see what the CDC guidance says tomorrow. I mean, the changing guidance could cause us to have to go back, rethink something, and move it forward.
So one thing that happened at the beginning of the year, when we were going to go hybrid, was to start remote because we had a staffing issue, and then we were going to then go hybrid after that. And I'm not hearing you making much of an issue of that right now as a major challenge.
Yeah, the challenge with staff at the beginning of the year was the accommodations process. If you remember, we had over 110 staff members that we had needed to work through those accommodation steps for. So it wasn't staff didn't want to return, it's we just had to work through that process and understanding 110 staff members' individual situations and determining if we could meet that accommodation or not, or if it was legitimate or not. That just took us into the start of the school year. We have resolved all of those, we're prepared for this. And actually any schedule that we build with less class periods shifting in a day makes covering subs and those much easier, right? So in some ways those changes make the staff issues simpler because it's just not as many moving parts once everybody's here.
It's important for people to hear that.
Yeah.
Because I've already heard from some people, well, is there still a staffing problem?
No.
You know, that's, and then the other piece of it on the transportation, I mean, I'm seeing signs up for first student hiring bus drivers. I mean, isn't that also a possible challenge? Not only the coordination with our partner districts, but just the availability of busing.
Yeah, we've been working very closely with First Student, and we believe that we'll have enough buses and drivers. The challenge is, as you'll see in one of the next slides, all the high schools in DuPage County are on the same timeline, right? So we're all going to be looking to return at the same time or within weeks of one another. So we count on it. We have a good relationship with First Student, and the fact that we do have this cooperative between the three schools, although it does create complexities, it does make us more of a heavy hitter in the bus market just because of the number of buses and the fleet that we need to maintain between three school districts. So that does provide us a good leverage point to get our buses up and running.
Good.
So Hank, and this is probably, maybe you're going to get into this either later or maybe next week when you get the schedule. My biggest concern about any new schedule, you know, we have what our schedule used to be, we had the hybrid schedule, we have the remote schedule. So my biggest concern is you look now, if you go back a year ago when we're full-time in school, kids are doing 4 days a week, they're doing 50 minutes in a period, so 200 minutes simple math. Now they're doing that same thing, they're doing 80-minute classes twice a week, so they're already losing 40 minutes of instruction time a week. So I'm concerned about when we talk about limiting to 1 passing period, 2 passing periods, and only being in 1 or 2 classes. I'm worried about impacting the amount of class time or face time with that teacher, no matter if it's in person or remote. So that's a concern I didn't see up here. And like I said, I'm sure
that's more what we'll get into next week, but it's a great point, Dan, to just highlight, and is a good predictor of some of the things we'll talk about next week. This year, there's about 240 minutes in a student schedule last year. Remember, Mondays are shortened because of the late start. This year, we have asked our teachers to plan for 240 minutes of student activity throughout the week. So between the class periods on the 280 minutes, plus the 25-minute period on Monday, and then any other work you're going to assign outside of that class meeting period should add up to that 240 minutes. And as Mike, as you said, teachers are a couple of weeks into this and are figuring out how to adjust and hit that. I'm sure some are under that, some are over that.
But there's
Hopefully
a
over
difference
time.
of having 240 with, and I don't know the numbers, with 200 of it being either in person or on the, or you know, Zoom versus, you know, 150 of
Right.
it being. So I said that's just going to be a big
Right.
consideration in my mind, a big concern as we look at any future schedules, the actual amount of time with that teacher, either remotely or in person.
Yeah, one of the things that definitely happens right now in fully remote is the most dedicated minutes that students are going to get as long as COVID's around, right? Because a teacher for that block of time can have all of their students together in there. Once we start moving to hybrid models, you start doing, everything's trade-offs, right? So the trade-off to get students back in person is inefficiencies in the schedule, right? They can't just wake up, walk up to their computer and get to work. They've got to get to school, there's got to be passing periods, we can only take up to half the students at a time, you know, and it's going to, in some ways, reduce the minutes. It will reduce the efficiency of those minutes in comparison to how they are now, right? A teacher can really, there's not many variables, there's no competing factors against them outside of the technology and, you know, the ability for students to pay attention for during a remote session, right? There's very few competing factors. Teachers can plan very clearly for what that environment is going to be, assuming that everything works correctly, right? Once we start moving to hybrid models, teachers have to start planning for more types of learning activities, right? They're going to have to plan for students that are in person and students that are remote, how those groups interact with one another, how those transitions work. They have to plan for in-person classroom management again, and how does in-person classroom management work with masks on and with social distancing and all those things that we know eventually when students come back. But you can imagine if right now, and this is one of the concerns on our educational leadership team, if right now the efficacy of instruction is on an increasing curve, let's just assume it is, because kids are getting used to it, teachers are getting used to it, everybody's used to the tools, kids are planning, they know their schedule, all of those things are getting predictable. And it's the maximum number of minutes that we can give everybody equally in that time. As soon as we put a new schedule in place, there will be a dip in that. Because everybody's got to plan differently, teach differently, it's everything, it's the start of the school year all over again. Plus you need to build in opportunities for kids to get to know one another in person and to know each other's names and to know what that person looks like with a mask on. And there is a huge reshuffling of the school year. There's going to be there are trade-offs instructionally for the benefits of bringing students in for in-person learning. And that's what we're trying to do, is to make sure that the trade-offs are of value, are worth it, to make this all worthwhile, and that families know those trade-offs before they select what model do I want my child to be learning in. So, you know, this is part of the stuff that takes time and working through and thoughtfulness, especially because the rules of the game were kind of just established 10 days ago.
Can I just say, too, that I think it's a bit of a trap if we get too caught up into trying to measure what we're doing based on the minutes. A minute is not a minute is not a minute.
Right.
And in the end, what we're really looking for are results, right? So the question is, ultimately, are we getting through the curriculum? Are the students learning? And, you know, what's the result of all of that? And I think if we stay focused on that and using the tools that we have, that's where we need to be. Ultimately, maybe we do need more minutes than what's being delivered right now.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, I don't, I mean,
But-
because you could get through a schedule by
Right.
just,
Right.
I mean, there's in-person,
Right.
there's asynchronous, and there's synchronous learning,
Right.
and all three of them have positives and negatives and
Sure.
trade-offs, and it's what mix of those is the
Right.
best mix
Right.
for our students moving forward. And hopefully, picking a model that's gonna work and be there for
Sure.
more than a week before something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, I've read some of the, some of the emails and people's comments about things as well, and I just think it's, I don't think that we need to be looking at this from the standpoint of, hey, it's 240 minutes here, it's 220 minutes this way, or whatever, and somehow there's something less happening.
No, it's
because
different.
we're really focused on quality,
Well,
not
and
quantity.
it's what are you offering in each of those, right? In-person
That's
has
right.
a set of variables and experiences that we can't offer
Correct.
in any other way. Remote also has some of those. You heard some of those advantages from our students tonight that we can't offer in-person, right? But it's about the balance of what goals are we trying to achieve instructionally within that. And I will also point out, Mike, to bolster your minutes claim that you just made, there's absolutely no educational research that correlates number of minutes to educational attainment, right? It's what happens inside of that time, and the effectiveness of the teacher inside of that time is far more important. But that's the trade-off, right? The more the teachers are having to plan for something new and adjust and adapt, and I had this planned and now I have to do this, that lowers the effectiveness of any minutes that we have within that class period. So giving teachers time to plan, to put together good experiences for kids, to make sure that the time that they have with them is optimized to the utmost of their ability, regardless of the learning mode or model that is taking place, is the most important factor, which is another reason, to go back to what you were saying, Nancy, turning on a dime to go into one of these models that they've never taught in before is not a smart move to make. We need to have time here for planning, professional development, to make sure that our teachers have time to do their work, right? Because our teachers are professional. They're going to research how other schools are doing this, how it's working across the country, and our teachers are going to put together good experiences for their kids. But there's going to be a learning curve for any new model we introduce, just like there was for remote learning at the beginning. All right, so programs for students that are most at risk, T99, we're bringing them back tomorrow. Okay, so remember that's its own building, it's its own students with their own unique set of abilities and challenges. So
That's great news.
we've worked through that. We'll start bringing them back on an A-B schedule each day tomorrow.
About how many, remind me, about how many students do we have and about how many teachers? So how many people are in the building at any day on the AB schedule?
I don't know in the new schedule how it's exactly working, but it's less than 30.
Less than 30?
Yeah, yeah, on a daily basis.
That's what.
I'm not sure, I can't give you an exact
No,
number,
that's fine.
but generally
that's fine.
speaking.
But it's my point
Less
is
than
it's a
30
small
students.
number.
Oh, it's a very small
And
group.
It's a small building, but it's
Right.
not that small.
Yep. We're working, as I mentioned earlier, we're working with students that have internet challenges at home to try to get them long-term solutions. But students that are critically challenged in that, we're not able to close the gap. If they're not able to connect to remote learning, it's critical that we get them to a place where they can. So we've identified a very small number of students at North, a little bit larger number of students at South, that we're going to start looking at just having them work from school remotely, just knowing that we have internet, we have power, we have good environment where they could work. We'll have an adult supervise that group of students while they just do their remote learning from here.
Once again, some approximation of the actual numbers? I mean, what's small group in the context of 5,000 students?
Gina, what numbers are we looking at for?
Okay. That's more than I would have, that's more than what I was thinking.
So we're in the process of reaching out to all those families, determine if it's appropriate for them to come in, then we have to arrange for a location, transportation, all of those things to make sure that it works and that they're being taken care of. And we also have some folks with home challenges as well, where they don't have stable housing or there's some concerns about their wellness or safety at home, and we'll look at bringing some of those students in as well.
And they'll come in every day. They won't be on any sort of.
Yeah, we're working on how that schedule will work for them. English learners, Gina's been working on that all summer. We're getting closer to those groups being able to come in. And I say those groups because within the English learners, there's multiple levels of English acquisition that we're responding to. And then inside of special education, we have the life skills group, we have the multi-needs group, we have other specific cohorts that we're looking to try to bring back in as well. So the idea with all of these groups for students most at risk is to slowly just kind of build this and bring in more and more students and keep them sustainable and keep the programs. We're trying to build those programs in a way that they are sustainable even if we move deeply into the substantial area. So we're trying to keep the number of students that they come in contact with on a daily basis very small so that they could keep operating here even if transmission levels continue to grow.
Well, this was the group that I was most, when I was talking about remote for most, this is the group that was
most at risk.
Most at risk.
Yep.
This is that group. So it's good to see that we're getting them taken care of.
All right, so other neighboring districts, you know, I meet with the other, all DuPage superintendents meet twice a week. We meet on Mondays and Fridays to discuss how things are going and to also meet with the DuPage County Health Department to understand what transmissions levels look like in the county and how to respond to those. And then I meet with the District 99 partner superintendents once a week as well to discuss how programming is going in all of our partner districts. We all continue to be very frustrated. I imagine many of our families listening to what I'm talking about right now that want their kids back at school, many of our students that want to be back at school tomorrow are frustrated, and so am I. So is our administrative team.
So are we.
As I have continued to say, if we would have had the guidance that we have now in June or July, our kids would be back right now. I am confident that we would have been able to build a safe program that worked in moderate or minimal, especially given the time and space of the summer to do that. However, we are where we are now, and you know, being frustrated isn't going to help us fix it. So we're working closely to, you know, we're sure that we don't have all of the best ideas in the county, so we're working closely with other school districts to see what's working for them and how they're approaching it. Most of the other large public high schools, and that's who we need to compare ourselves to,
that's right,
is other large public high schools. They're facing the same challenges and school sizes and restrictions that we are on similar time frames. They're looking at either this week or next week starting to return their most at-risk students in a variety of different programs, and then are looking at somewhere in October for a return.
Hank, for the sake of the audience, can you maybe further explain how it is that so many of the private schools are able to start? But we already understand why, you know, we need to follow executive orders. We need to follow the guidelines.
Yeah, because we are a public high school, we clearly fall under the executive orders and the direction of Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health.
Right.
Where a private school has more liberties that they can take within those guidelines.
It's essentially, for lack of better description, a group of people that have a private membership to something, and then they can decide amongst themselves.
To some extent.
They can limit they can ask their families to, sign something that says they're not going to sue them or something. I don't know, but there's more, they have more control over that.
They definitely have more control over that, and they tend to be smaller settings, right? They're smaller settings, so they a lot of times have like a grade level.
Right.
A single grade level at each, so, you're not talking about even the larger high schools are still very small in comparison to what we're talking about here. I mean, when I see a lot of community members that are frustrated sending me school districts that are open, many of those school districts have less students than one class in one of our high schools. Yes, if you have 500 to 600 kids, you likely can be open right now, especially at the elementary level.
Sure.
You're not seeing large high schools like us that are in close proximity to Chicago, or that have a train line running through us that are taking people back and forth to Chicago every day, that are open. It's not, you don't see that in the suburbs yet.
Right.
It's just, and we're all in similar spots. Stuff further west, you're starting to see, like Lincoln Way open up. You're starting to see some of the smaller high schools that are able to work in this and develop programming. But districts our size, with as many students and staff and moving pieces that we have, and also what that also offers that is a great advantage to our community is a great wealth in curricular choice for students. If we only offered like English 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we had science 1, 2, 3, and 4, and social science 1, 2, 3, and 4, it'd be real easy to build a schedule and to do things remotely and in person, but we don't.
Right.
By the time our students are in their sophomore year, even in their freshman year, they have a couple of options to them. But by the time they're in their sophomore and junior years, and especially senior year, the degree of curricular variance that we have is so great that it makes building schedules very complex.
I just shared that with a constituent the other day, almost exactly as you've just said. And I think it's also worth noting, so many of us went to high school so long ago, me probably more than, you guys are all young.
No.
Right? So, at any rate, high school doesn't look today like it did for me back between 1980 and 84. There's so many more classes offered. Things are, so I've heard from some people going, thinking, I don't know that everybody really understands, the breadth of what we're offering here, and that is making it more difficult for us in terms of accommodating within these plans. But I just thought it was important because I know you've seen the same emails. People saying, "Well, there's schools around us that are open. Why can't we do it? We're fairly well off here, and we've got smart people. Why can't we do it?" And these are the reasons why. And I just, for the benefit of those watching, want them to understand we are working hard at this. So.
And the last point on here is we want to do this right this time. Now that we know what we know and about the fluidity of moving between these transmission levels, we don't want to end up building a plan, sending it out to the community and saying, oh, it changed, so here we go again, right? We would like to, now that we have this, to try to future-proof our plans and try to make something so that as long as we're in moderate, that we can have students coming back on a regular basis. But we want to make sure it's a good experience for students. And that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to build that. And hopefully, we're spending the majority of our days on this, and I'm hoping to bring you a pretty good plan next Monday when we meet, and then have some more timelines and details approach to it. But we have a lot of chicken egg problems right now. It's like we need to have transportation to bring students to school, but we can't figure out transportation until we have a schedule.
Yep.
But I can't guarantee you a schedule until I know transportation works, right? So you move a little bit in one way and you say, oh, this is what I'm thinking. And then you kind of throw it against the transportation wall and you're like, oh, wait, that's not going to work. So then you back up and now you got to move a little bit forward while at the same time you're doing things with schedules, you're doing it with classrooms, you're doing it with curriculum, you're doing it within the days of the week and how days off are falling and everything else. So you move forward a little bit and then you run into a roadblock and then you have to back off a little bit and then push through. It's a huge logic puzzle to work through. So that's why it goes slower than we would like.
Well, and the other thing is if we aren't really ultra careful and we actually make a situation where we increase transmissibility, that puts us way back to square one. And I don't think that's what people understand. If you really want to get out of this, you got to adhere to the rules. You got to wear your mask. You got to stay 6 feet away. You got to not be in congregate settings. And we're going into weather where everybody's going to be inside. Transmissibility, the numbers are going to rise. So it's not a, oops, we made a mistake kind of thing.
Correct.
We will go immediately back.
Well, and the DuPage County Health Department, along with us, will be looking at our own metrics within our own school walls. And if we build a plan that helps increase the rate of spread in our own community, we're going to be told by the health professionals, you need to change something. And I'd rather not have to keep doing this. I'd rather build a plan that works, that doesn't have community spread any greater than it is in the local community. And we have a plan and we move forward for the rest of the year and we get off of this ride,
It would be interesting to know, and it doesn't have to be for next week, but at some point, how are we going to track this internally?
We do. We have attendance codes and metrics, and we have a report that we provide to the DuPage
So it's all
County Health.
done?
That's all set up. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
And that includes close contacts?
Yeah, there's a whole process for contact tracing, and we work with the DuPage County Health Department. We have letters, we have a whole process. That's all been worked on over the last month.
I have a little concern, Hank, in terms of us, what you're going to bring to us in terms of us maybe bringing the students back. I would hate for us to be in looking at your continuum between phase 3 and phase 5. And if we're at the low to moderate band, but some of the metrics have us right at the edge of that, and we've been trending up. So I don't know what the break point is, say, for instance, cases per 100,000.
Yeah, that's where it becomes less cut and dry so far as what the metrics are saying, and more talking with the health officials about our specific community, our school. That's why getting students back actually helps us with our metrics. Because if we get students back and they're following the guidelines and our rate of community spread while they're here at school is lower than the greater community, we could demonstrate that kids are actually safer when they're here at school than when they're not, right? But until we are able to cross that threshold and demonstrate that, we're stuck in this.
I don't think you're ever going to be able to demonstrate that, because you're never going to be able to separate out if our community spread increases. We can't tell if it's because kids came here or somebody came in from Chicago or...
But we will know if it's greater than what the community is within our own walls. We might not be able to demonstrate that it's less, but we could definitely demonstrate that it's spreading faster within our walls. For the
age cohort.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if we look at District 99 in comparison to the county numbers.
Yeah.
For the age cohort, not for the general.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we could definitely, and we've already talked through with the DuPage County Health Department how some of those conversations will work. They've made it very clear that it will be a collaborative conversation to determine what we should do at that time. So, it'll be just like the conversations we're having now as to what we should do.
Hey, Hank, has the state or DuPage County Health Department talked about recurring testing of students, and like we're doing in most of our universities?
That conversation is starting at the test level about some of the saliva tests and those kinds of things and the feasibility of widespread testing. One of I think I shared with the board last month, one of the things that the DuPage County Health Department says one of our greatest limiting factors is the lack of widespread testing. That would give the health professionals the data they need to know, are these measures effective? Are we doing what we're supposed to do? Are we, is this really somebody that has COVID and we need to respond and lock things down for their cohort of people or not? That if we had more rapid, widespread testing, they would be much more comfortable with moving us in the direction more towards minimal, even if the metrics are bad, but it's the data.
They're doing it at our public universities now.
Yeah.
So the funding is coming from somewhere for that.
Well, the funding, like at U of I, is coming from, that is their own R&D to be able to put a product to market.
Well, both my daughter's colleges are doing it too now. I mean, they tested coming in, and now 3 and 4 weeks later, they're testing all the kids again.
The other thing that universities have are like student health centers, and they have people there on staff at a level of medical expertise that a public high school doesn't have.
Sure. But you said that, what I heard you say to Dan was that they're working on that?
We're starting to have discussions about we're at the earliest level of discussions of what that would look like. But it's something we're advocating for in DuPage County with state officials to try to get more widespread testing at the student and staff level within high schools.
So we're asking for it.
We're asking for a pathway to that.
But we're not. But so far, we aren't getting any sort of anything to make
It's
us
just
believe
too early.
that it's coming,
Yeah.
or there's no indication.
Too early to know.
All right. All right.
Well, and remember, testing is only a snapshot in time.
Sure.
You can test negative tomorrow and get COVID, or today and get COVID tomorrow.
Sure. But more information is better than less.
Oh, no, I don't disagree with you. I'm saying it has its limitations.
And to get us as many tools as we can have to monitor and control, the better. So it's a shame we don't have this. And the other, before we move on here too, you mentioned about on this collaborating with our other districts and what's working for them, what's not in DuPage County. But aren't there examples elsewhere in the country where schools have instituted some sort of hybrid type schedule already? And are we seeing any data from their experiences?
It's really challenging yes, we are. We're looking at the stories, and especially what is working instructionally in those settings is good to know. But it's very rarely it's apple to apple when you go even outside of county lines, let alone state lines. The rules are different, the expectations are different, the communities are different. So it's really hard to say, oh, what you're doing is working, let's just take that, because they're not building with the same set of Lego pieces that we are.
Wasn't suggesting that at all, but just, to be able to know what is working, and whether or not that applies or not.
Actually, a lot of the early conversations are about the frustrations that districts have because kids don't have access to technology resources. Mm-hmm. So many of the district stories that are out there are about districts that are trying to catch up to where we are now.
Got it.
They're learning from us. But the other ones that have kids going back or going back in wholesale are under a much different set of health guidelines. And those are things you could argue all day about, but are not within our purview to decide for all of the reasons I mentioned at the top. All right, so a couple of things in new schedule considerations. Just to review, the hybrid schedule that we presented this summer. So this is the baseline that we're starting from. Like, we built a schedule this summer that works, but it works only in minimal, because what we built to was to follow the safety guidelines, the 6 feet of social distancing. That was the biggest thing that we were building around. We wanted every student to see every teacher every week, but to do that, you need to bring students back, and they go through a 4-period rotation once, and then a 4-period rotation the next time. That doesn't work in moderate because you have too much mixing of students. And then one of the things that we had was that we wanted to separate the time that in-person was learning in person, the in-person was happening separate from remote because of the challenges for a teacher to manage all of the classroom environment of in-person at the same time you're managing outside. And that was one of the key things that we built, was that these were two distinct cohorts that were working in time and space. And some of our same things exist as we try to build one for minimal and moderate. Safety guidelines, 6 feet of social distancing. Now we add the limiting mixing of groups, which drastically changes our schedule. We still want the opportunity for every student to see every teacher regularly, but it's probably over a 2-week period, not a 1-week period, because of the limiting of the mixing of groups. We still are working through the concept of in-person learning scheduled separate from remote learning, and determining whether or not we need to build a systematic schedule that puts those in separate buckets so that a teacher always has one group separated from the other, or are we going to build a model that the teacher manages that time and space, where they would be responsible for both groups and determining when they would learn at the same time and when they would work at separate times. But we're working through with our instructional leaders of how that works. This is the feedback that we're hearing from other school districts around the country, is that that's really hard to do effectively. It's really, multitasking with 2 groups of students is a challenge. So if we do that, it's something we're going to have to talk about very carefully and provide a lot of examples for our staff as to how to do that effectively. One of the other things, one of the big key feedbacks that we did hear between our hybrid schedule this summer and the remote schedule was how different they are from one another, and that it's a complex change between one and the other, right? Because we did build them from the ground up, one to be totally developed to meet the needs of in-person learning, one to meet the needs of remote. They look very different. But what we've heard from students and staff is, could we get something that's more alike than different, so it's easier to transition between the two, because we know we're going to have to do that throughout the year. So that's a variable we're introducing into this, is there might be some differences, but to keep them closer than the original hybrid and remote schedule models looked. So that's kind of what we're building from as we work right now. Oh, I didn't change slides for you, did I? There's those things I just said again. All right, we have some other considerations to solve for that sit on the calendar. So as we look at our possible return dates in October, October is a weird month at the beginning, in the fact that the first week of October is a full week, but then the next week of October we have a remote learning planning day that's the offset of the non-attendance day that is traditionally Columbus Day, that occurs on Monday. Then Wednesday is SAT testing for seniors. We needed to find somewhere to put parent-teacher conferences, so we're going to schedule them for that same week, because that week is all messed up anyway. But when we talk, you heard from the kids today, when they come back, they want to come back to something consistent. They don't want to come back and then go to something weird and then come back to something again, right? So the question is, do we come back, around October 5th? That's a date many DuPage schools are talking about, and schools are debating the same thing we are. Do we come back on October 5th, have a week of some kind of a hybrid model, then we have a week of it's all messed up, and then go back to the hybrid model? Or do we just work, plan, get every detail worked through, work with our teachers to get everything in place, and come back on the week of the 19th after the messed up week with testing and everything else? There's pros and cons with both, right? If you come back for the week before, you can come back, you could do a run, we could learn from it, we could adjust during the week that's crazy and it's going to be remote, and then come back to an improved the week after. Or do we just say, you know what, let's not bounce kids and teachers between two different things and let's just target the 19th? That's a big conversation that we're going to have over the next week here, right, is determining what is that best date to come back. We know some people want to come back as soon as possible, and I get that. I do too, but I also want to make sure that it works and it's within reason. There's not these huge dips in the experience for our kids as a result of it.
So remember back when we were talking about the hybrid schedule this summer and the notion that, hey, we'd like to get the kids back as soon as possible because we're thinking things are going to get worse as time goes on, not get better. So wouldn't that be consideration as well?
It is, yeah. If the numbers continue to look worse, this might not even be a conversation for a while, right? So that is another major pressure on here, is that get kids back sooner than later because the numbers could go the wrong direction.
Right.
You know, we could also just be in a dip here because of the Labor Day holiday, and numbers could improve after this dip. I don't know. The question is, do they dip so far that we're now insubstantial and have to work our way back out of it?
I was just throwing in another consideration.
No, it's all on the pro-con list right now as we work through all of it. So
that would leave about, if you're talking the 19th, that's what, 8 weeks left of school?
yeah, it's about the midpoint of the semester. You know, which, okay, that's not a bad time to transition to something different.
I'm just trying to frame it up in my head.
Yeah, you know, and then if we end up in terrible data around that time, I don't know what happens from there, you know.
Off topic, but have we decided anything, or is your finals going to look different for this semester?
Yeah, finals will definitely not look like they did in the past. There's just no way for that to occur. Yeah.
When do you think we give some indication of what that's going to look like?
What finals will look like?
Yeah. Other than, I mean, I don't, because that leaves everybody wondering, okay, it doesn't look anything like it has in the past.
Well, in the spring, they didn't either. I mean, it's totally different instruction standards. I mean, they can't look like they did in the past. So, but I haven't had the conversation with our teams yet about, you know, what they're talking about doing yet at the end of the year, or end of the semester.
And then we're working on the SAT for the 14th.
Yep,
And-
that's what
and-
Gina's working on.
In a way to do that.
Correct.
As safe as possible.
Well, on that day, the only students we would be able to have in the building are seniors. You know, so, but that would be a testing day for seniors.
Okay.
All right, and the last thing we're also working through is the teacher appraisal process and how that works. Because our old teacher evaluation system is all built around seeing teachers teach for a whole class period, you know, and those kinds of things, and some informal drop-ins. So, you know, Ed and Janice are getting into, and our administrators are dropping in and are being invited into remote classrooms right now. But how this works, especially for our non-tenured teachers, we're working through, and we have a meeting scheduled, I think, next week with our appraisal committee to work on this. All right, I know we've taken a lot of questions so far. Are there any left out there?
Oh, we weren't supposed to ask it.
No, I got them all out of the way in advance.
Anything else before we move on?
We heard a little from the students in terms of the kind of the how's it going sort of question and response. I'd be curious to hear something similar from the teaching staff.
Yeah, that's all coming in that survey information that's going out over the next couple of weeks. So surveys will go to families, to students, and to staff to help us get feedback on how the experience is going. And those surveys are being built by that feedback committee.
But certainly we have something ongoing.
Yeah, those will go out on a regular basis throughout the rest of the year.
Okay.
But we have meetings, you know, Ed and Janice meet with their leadership team very frequently, like weekly or sometimes even more often. And that's through the department chairs. That's how we are getting feedback right now through that leadership structure. But we're getting ready to have those surveys that go out so everybody can offer us their direct feedback.
So right now, though, certainly we must be receiving emails from parents and students about issues that are going on in their classrooms. And
Absolutely.
so how is is all that, when we get information, how is that being disseminated to the teachers?
Well, we always encourage people to reach out to the teacher directly. I mean, it's the same thing that would have happened if people are in person, right? So if somebody reaches out to me, I usually direct them back to their teacher, or if they're not comfortable talking to the teacher, then the department chair. If that goes nowhere, then the building level administrator, and we work through the chain of command, just like if it was in person.
So is there a general sense that what we're dealing with right now isn't much more different than we in a typical year, or do we have any sense?
No, it's very different, but I don't know, it's hard to tell, Mike, as to whether it's more or less. It's just different, right? The types of issues are different, the type of discipline issues are different, attendance is all different, parent concerns. You know, parents a lot of times are working at the table right next to their kids, so
Yeah.
the stuff that they're hearing and providing feedback on is very different than a school year when
I
a
understand
student
that.
comes home with, this is what happened in class. Now it's, this is what I heard in class.
So
you know?
I just, so what I'm hearing right now, we are now, are we 4 weeks in? How many weeks in are we now?
Of remote learning?
Yeah. But,
How many weeks have we been doing the remote schedule?
right.
What was that, Janice?
4.
4? I don't know, it feels like 40 years right now, Mike, so it's hard to tell.
But and what I'm hearing is getting surveys, and it seems, I'm just concerned that getting almost 2 months in before we're
Yeah, but,
getting information.
I mean, if you would have asked 2 weeks ago, nobody had any routine established or anything else at that time. I mean, you got to give it time to breathe and to get into place and for people to get into a groove before you can ask them how is it going, you know. I think we're getting to that point where it is time to do it. Plus, we needed time with the feedback committee to do the work, to build the surveys, to find the right company to do it, to work through all of how the analytics are going to work and the feedback will go. So, you know, in a regular year, yeah, and I am sure that teachers are getting feedback from students and that they're hearing from students, because that's, you know, that's what we're encouraging everybody to do. That's the best way that a teacher on the ground can learn as to what's going on right now, is to seek that feedback.
Well, my own personal experience so far, I have my daughter, and it seems to be going quite well. But I have no idea of how representative that is of everyone else's experience, and it just,
I think most people are giving us time, and we appreciate that. People are being patient with what's going on. Students are. You heard patience out of our students today. Parents are as well, knowing this is all new to everybody and that we're going to work through it. But people also, just like they always are, if we have something that majorly concerns a parent, they're not afraid to reach out.
Okay.
Anything you would like to hear from some teachers or department chairs?
Yeah, we're already 4 weeks in, and
Yeah.
I don't want to wait another month before I'm hearing back from people.
Well, Mike, I would assume that if it was horrible, that we as an administration and you as a board would be hearing about it, because our community has not been bashful.
So that's been my sole sort of, yes, I certainly felt like with the volume of emails that we were getting prior to our start of the school year, that there's a lot of people that are not afraid to speak their mind.
Well, by no means. Like I said, I don't think we have it perfect yet. I think that people are being patient, and you heard the kids, teachers are improving, their experience is getting better. Yeah. And I think as long as people see it continue to improve, people's patience will remain. But if they see it stagnate or go backwards, people aren't going to be happy with what they're getting.
And we're providing lots of support for our teaching staff as well. I assume
there's a lot of time built in for professional development and for planning and team collaboration, which there has to be, because every teacher's a first-year teacher all over again.
Yeah.
So to develop and to deliver quality instruction, our teachers need time to work with that, especially across their teams, right? So that our kids are getting similar experiences within the same course.
Yeah. The quicker we can gather information, the better.
We're on it.
Hank, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rick.
Rod's team, how are they handling? Because that was a little embarrassing to hear that a kid can't get his Chromebook exchanged out, and he has to listen to his phone while he's got the computer.
Well,
If it was one day, okay, but if this has been going on for a week, who does he contact? Do the teachers know to direct those students? And why hasn't that fixed? Because that's not right. With as many Chromebooks as we have bought over the years, he should be able to get replaced or swapped out.
yeah, I'm not sure
Without-
about his particular timeline, but we do have a help desk that's staffed. Our staff has worked, throughout the week and over the weekends to make sure. I'm not sure about his particular issue, but it sounds like he got a bum piece of equipment and then he ended up drawing a bad card and got
Sit on
another
it
one.
for a week,
Well, but I don't know, Rick, how soon he reached back out to ask for, I don't know his particular story, but if somebody shows up with a bad Chromebook at school, we give them a brand new one right there on the spot.
So I hate to pile on to Rick's situation here, but I can tell you that my daughter's had problems with her Chromebook.
Well, individual issues are not indicative of a widespread issue. I'm not hearing
Well,
of,
most kids aren't going to raise their hand if they have an issue. They're going to try to work through it unless it actually leaks out to the teacher, and the teacher may say, hey, I didn't realize you're having this problem, and then forward it on.
we have,
Most kids aren't going to be calling the switchboard at school saying, hey, I need a new
there's
computer.
an email address that we've told them all that's the help desk. Every teacher knows how to get a student help. Every counselor knows how to. So we have all of the processes in place. A kid just needs, or a parent just needs to let us know when we work through that. And I have not heard, other than the Zoom issues that came up that were either nationwide or the ones related to malfunctioning hotspots that we couldn't quickly resolve, I have not heard of widespread concerns about tech issues across the district. There's always going to be, look, it's tech, right?
Right.
You're always going to
Understand,
have individuals.
There's got to be an avenue where they can advocate.
There is. There's,
But they're not going to do it on their own.
there are many ways in which they can do that. We continue to publicize that to all of our students.
I'd like to know how long he's been working on it like that.
I don't know about his individual issue, Rick.
Yeah.
But I'm not hearing about,
No, I would like to know.
I'm not hearing about
If it
widespread.
was a week, it's a week
concern.
too long.
Yeah, like I said, I can't speak to his specific situation.
One of the questions I have coming up, and again, it doesn't have to be for next week, but at some point, I'd like to hear more about how, there's a lot of concerns about how we're going to do emotional support of our students, counseling, social workers, et cetera, remotely. And I would, both remotely and with hybrid, it would be nice at some point soon, just to have an update about what's going
Sure.
on in that area. I'd appreciate that.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Nancy, I didn't quite hear.
Social emotional supports for our students, just to provide an update on
These
that.
masks have made
I
me.
know.
Yeah, I know. it's hard.
Masks, and you gotta get a little closer to the.
Sorry,
microphone.
I moved this so I could
Yeah.
stare down at my
Absolutely.
computer.
Thank you.
No, we're very active in those areas. We can definitely provide an update.
Anything else? I know this has been a tremendous amount of work.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
And thank you all. This is not easy. It is a moving target. I am glad, I am proud that we are taking that we are doing things the safest way that we can. And it's not easy. And I do appreciate everybody's patience, both in administration and in staff and in students and in the community, because it has been a hard thing. And I appreciate all the work that everybody has done, because this has just been a tremendous lift. So thank you all for everything you do every day.
All right. Next item to just quickly go through, the board has been provided these materials, but to just go through quickly here, any master facility plan updates. We're wrapping up Phase B. from the summer. You're now sitting in the South Steam Edition. If you go out front, you'll see the new Dunham Drive that's going in place. I think those pavers go in this week, right? Yeah. So this is wrapping up. The bleachers and squad rooms here at South are almost done. Dan and I kind of got a little peek of it last week, but I didn't have the keys to get in, so.
What is it, the bottom left? What is that?
That is the squad room underneath the bleachers. So that's the space that's enclosed and heated, but students can go, the teams can go into, yeah. And at South, there's
security's pretty good. We couldn't get in.
Yeah, we couldn't break in.
Yeah.
They've heard about you, Dan.
And it
Yeah,
looks
they
like
heard about us.
there's enough restrooms.
Yeah. South Auditorium, you can't drive by the building without missing that. A lot of work underway there. Here's a few pictures of the structure going up with the precast concrete.
What's the finish going to be on the outside of that, Hank?
I can't remember off the top of my head, Mike. I know we've talked about it before, but right now my brain isn't holding that right now. We probably made room for some alternative schedule. I'll have to go back and look.
So is that the fly?
That's the fly tower. The biggest part of it is the
tower?
fly tower. Yeah, yeah. And then in front of it is the small theater to the left of the image in front of the fly tower, then the scene shop and the dressing rooms, and then all the way over to the right is the theater classroom, the new theater classroom. The South Learning Commons is starting to take place, including the grand staircase has gone in, but a lot of the steel is in, the structural steel is in place, and if you get a chance to walk it now, you'll get an idea of the size and scope of that space. It's enormous. Here's a couple more pictures of the Commons. The one in the top left-hand corner is that grand staircase going up across all 3 levels with study lofts on it. Then over at North High, the gym and the alley are almost entirely completed at this point. The serving area and kitchen.
Wow.
Their squad rooms are starting to get buttoned up and insulated and in place. They're almost caught up to South High here after that initial huge setback because of the foundations underneath it. So they've been trailing South High since the start. North Library and Commons. The library is beautiful.
Yes, it is.
These I added last minute, so the board hasn't seen this, because today they started bringing in the structural steel for the roof.
Nice.
Yeah, for the roof that goes over it. So I think that's today, the next 3 days, right, that they're doing that. So the crane over there is pretty cool. We had a lot of neighbors out there watching the big chunks fly over the roof today. So in the next couple of weeks, that'll get sealed up and be ready to be worked on throughout the winter.
Interesting structure there. Nice.
The Steam Edition, if you drive by that southeast corner, the outside is starting to look complete. The inside isn't there yet, but it'll be there in the next month here or so. But it looks so much better.
I think that's going to end up being, people are just going to wonder, didn't it always look like that?
Correct.
I mean,
the brick matches exactly.
Perfectly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
looking good.
Yeah, it's looking really nice there, instead of that wart that was on the southeast corner of the building. All right. Tours are still available if you haven't gone on one yet.
I just want to say, Hank gave me a tour 2 weeks ago. It is phenomenal. I suggest everybody ask Hank to take him on a tour. It is just worth it.
Any chance that we could have one of our meetings at North?
We can talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah. let me talk about it with the team and see. We're just
Okay.
working the bugs out here right now, and
Got it.
every time, it's, once again, the dip in the performance.
in the new
I think you've
number.
noticed that this meeting has been easier than the last one was.
Yes.
With,
All right.
So,
I just,
All the books in.
if we were thinking of doing that, then I would show up early, like we kind of, like we did prior, we had a little walk around here before a meeting.
Make it a one
it'd be a lot easier for me to lead a tour on a night that's
Okay.
not a board meeting.
All right, so I'll schedule something with you then. 'cause
That'd be
I wanna-
great.
I want to walk around at North.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dan went last week.
It is really,
It'll all be much nicer with students.
yes.
It absolutely
Amen to
will.
that. I mean, just the life.
That's it for me.
Anything more on the master facility plan?
Thank you.
Hearing none, we'll move on to the reception of visitors.
Yeah, hold on, let me pull up the spreadsheet.
It's up there, guidelines for reception.
This is an opportunity for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Is there anybody here who wishes to address the board? Is there anybody calling in who wishes to address the board?
We have some responses here. Let me make sure that I have the right date here. All right, we have a few receptions of visitor comments. Christina Paschal, dear board, the difficulty our kids are facing as time goes by only gets worse. Please do everything you can to get back to school urgently. Then from Gary Baker, I encourage the board to strongly consider some form of in-person learning as the benefits of in-person learning as compared to remote learning exceed the perceived risks of the virus. This has been demonstrated by other schools that have opened already. Thank you. From Beth Baker, as the mother of a District 99 student and someone who works with high schoolers from various schools in DuPage County, I would like to encourage the board to get students back to school for in-person learning. Given the low COVID risk for teens, the extraordinary preventative measures from North and South had planned to implement, the difficulties with remote learning and the increased mental health issues teens are experiencing by being out of school, I think this is not the only reasonable, I think that it is not only reasonable for students to return in some measure, but critical for them. My son's best friend had a horrible experience with technology speaking, such that in order to make it through most of his classes, he's had to do his e-learning at our house. The tech department at North, after repeating contacts, told the student's mother that they cannot find help for their son. Another student from a different district I work with has always been stable and grounded, has repeatedly reached out to me for support, and was called in to see her school's psychologist recently. She texted me that I don't even feel like I am living a life. Other students have expressed to me how much learning takes place online for a variety of reasons, and how the 80-minute periods are extremely difficult for them to get through. I know this is a tough situation for everyone, especially those who have to make the important decisions, and you are all in my thoughts and prayers. Please consider the costs of keeping students out of school when making your decisions. From Maria Thiessen, I want to share a comment from my daughter, who is a senior at DGN, that was made to me via text during the school day. She stated, I feel like I'm not learning anything in any class. This is an unsolicited comment made from a high-achieving, actively involved student. This should be a concern for every person in the room. She is a student that puts forth effort, works independently, and continually strives to do her best. The model of learning is not working for her. If it is not working for her, I wonder who else it is not working for. As a related service provider in a neighboring school district, I see firsthand the number of students that this is also not working for. I have yet to figure out how to provide classroom accommodations for many of the students in remote learning. How do I provide the scaffolding, prompting, and support that my students need while maintaining privacy in a remote classroom? It is impossible. I assume that the teachers of District 99 also realize this lack of capacity to provide the needed supports to students. We can all try our best, but the reality is that we are unable to provide what we know is the best practice in a virtual world. This is just one reason why students need to have at least some in-person instruction. This does not address the growing mental health concerns, the lack of successful distribution of meals to students, the reduced capacity to observe suspected abuse, neglect, the reported increase in substance abuse, nor the inequity in education that we are creating. The students of District 99 need to see a change to the option for a hybrid model, and I hope that the fear and lack of creativity does not prevent us from at least trying something that many schools, districts in both Illinois and other states have been able to accomplish. From her Maxie Minstry. Our DGN junior is a distinct honor student so far as having rough days. 80-minute periods are just too long for the students or teachers to stay focused on learning. What is happening is teachers end up creating breakout sessions to allow students to discuss, whereas the actual instruction is happening via homework to watch learning videos. In short, the school hours are in breakout sessions when students are attempting to have conversations but without really being taught anything. This needs to change immediately if we plan to continue remote learning. Ideally, I hope that we are working on getting back to school in earnest. Yes, there's a pandemic raging, but we cannot cripple our life by fear. At this point, it seems as though we are not even making an attempt to bring students back to school. In short, here is the remote learning changes I am proposing. No class longer than 45 minutes, reduce breaks in between, get through classes from 8 to 1 p.m. Teachers can have office hours between 1 and 3 when students can reach out to them via Zoom, scheduling a meeting, etc. And I am really interested in seeing what attempts the district is making to get students back in school. Waiting for a vaccine is not an acceptable answer. That is all of the comments that were received.
Thank you all. We do appreciate your comments, and the emails that we receive are shared amongst the board and administration alike. We're going to move into closed session. Is there anything else you had, Hank?
No action out of closed session.
No action on it.
No, yeah.
No.
We're going to move into closed session. We will not be taking any action when we come out, but I need a motion to go into closed session to discuss collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the district, or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Terry moves.
Second.
Sherelle seconds.
Thank you. Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, we are in closed session. We'll take a few-minute break.